the essential part of actual yoga, of becoming an actual yogi, is figuring out what it's really about, what's really of the essence, what's really the point, what is really what matters, what makes a difference, what is relevant, what is for real, as opposed to all the incredible volume of flotsam and jetsam that fills the body of spirituality, with all the sort of the rigmaroles and the rituals and the traditions and the different foreign languages and the terminologies and all these various aspects of information, which we're all very familiar with, fills out the embodiment of spiritual teaching. But the yogi wants to know, wait a minute, what's really going on here? What's going to do it? Show me the ropes. Show me what's really happening. It's like when you get a new job, there's all these things you're supposed to do and all that, but the guys that are the savvy guys will say, hey, what this is really about, what you really have to do is do this and watch out for that, and then you do that and everything will go great. And yoga is a lot like that. To be an effective yogi, to be a yogi that is actually moving into realization, it's important to in actuality tune into what is really going on, what is really effective, what is really the issue, and what to do about that. Because, in terms of spiritual information, maybe 95% of it is hot air. There's a very small percentage of it that is actually practical and useful and powerful. And most of it is a lot of, rituals and traditions and so on and so forth, which is all very well and good, but isn't going to do anything for you other than, be a way to spend your time. The point of yoga is realization. Realization is coming to see what you are, what this is. That seeing effectively removes and dissolves all confusion about what this is, what you are. That turns out to be the totality of spiritual problem. All spiritual conundrum is not seeing clearly what this is, not seeing reality clearly. So realization, or enlightenment, is realization of reality, of what this really is, of what you really are. And effective yoga is anything that efficiently enables you to recognize what this is, what you are, and hopefully bypassing a lot of the unnecessary side avenues of confusion and inefficient wasting of time as much as possible. So, since yoga is realizing what this is, the most efficient yoga is look at what this is. What is this? Here it is. It's actually here. It's actually not concealed. It's actually actual. What is this actuality that is here? And what is it? In what way is it what it is? In what ways is it presenting? Just all the aspects of it are ground level aspects to investigate. And it's all right here. It's all available for investigation. You're here. You're available for investigating. So have at it. So really efficient yoga is what is experience. Here this is it. This is experience. Or call it experiencing, or call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter what you call it. Here it is. It's actual. And if you look very hard, you can't find any other actuality. Anything else you find is just an abstraction based on this present fact of experience. So there's this experiential field which is present. If you actually exist, I assume you'll readily acknowledge that's the case. There's an experiential field which is present. You seem to be what seems to be experiencing it, and you can't find anything else. Anything else you think exists, the world, the universe, other people, other life forms, life in general, matter, all these things are, abstractions, abstract interpretations that are derived from the actuality of the presence of this experiential field. So here's this field. Check it out. What is it? Just on that absolute naked basis. Here is this presence, this field of presence. What do you notice about it? Well, immediately you notice it seems to present as all of these amazing experiential qualities, as all these apparent colors and sensory information and thought and feelings and emotion, and just this barrage, this ongoing hurricane of all of these experiential qualities. They clearly manifest with a high degree of instability. They manifest with a high degree of inconstancy. And yet, they're always present. It never looks like nothing. Everything doesn't ever completely disappear, as far as one can tell. And so, cool. So what is that? What is this that is that way? What are these experiential qualities? Well, that's a very good yoga right there. What are experiential qualities? What is color? What is light? What is sound? What is thought? And these questions are actually possible to engage with because all of these actualities are in fact present in experience, available for intelligence to investigate, available for intelligence to look at. So what is this light? How is it here? Of course, right away one discovers that there's no simple answers to these kinds of questions. It's not like, oh, what is light? Oh, it's ... period, I got it. That's the answer, next. It's not like that. You discover right away that the nature of what is here is surpassingly subtle, surpassingly non-verbal, surpassingly slippery, subtle, multidimensional. I mean, you can throw all sorts of qualifiers at it. But the point is not, again, to write a thesis about it. The point is to be with very nakedly what it actually is. So it is subtle, but on the other hand, the consciousness that is perceiving it is subtle. So the subtlety is capable of meeting the subtlety as it is. It's not like, oh, I'm an idiot. Here's this amazing, inconceivable, real, actual, light and all these qualities. So I'm just this stupid asshole sitting here going, what is this stuff? In actuality, what I am, what is perceiving this, is an astounding present intelligence that whose limits are unknown. It's a question mark. It's like, well, what is this that is perceiving this? I mean, that's another question. You can look at what is light, but what is seeing the light? How is it being seen? So this intelligence that is actually perceiving and engaged with all of this amazing, miraculous actuality is itself of the nature of what is being presented, of what is being perceived. So what is being perceived is extremely subtle. All this light, all these qualities, thought, whatever, it doesn't matter how you qualify it. It turns out what it actually is completely surpasses our human categorization of it. So whether we categorize things as sensory fields or the presence of photons on the optic nerve or this, that, and the other is completely irrelevant, because when you get down to the actuality, it completely transcends all that, and all of these human qualifications turn out to be very heavy-handed approximations. But when one gets to the subtlety of the nature of what this is, the subtlety of what is perceiving it, the subtlety of perceptive intelligence, the subtlety of apparent consciousness, meets it where it is, meets it as it is. And so, even though it's entirely irrational, entirely undescribable, entirely non-verbal, some profundity is actually nakedly clear. And this profundity is perceivable to that which is that profundity, so it is capable of perceiving that profundity because it is of a similar order of subtlety, of a similar order of transcendental nature. So this is the real cutting edge of yoga, is letting go of rational process, letting go of verbal process, and being with the presence of actual experiential actuality with that which it is present to, consciousness, intelligence, whatever. And again, qualifying it as consciousness or as intelligence is very heavy-handed and absurd, because very rapidly one will discover that divisions of subjectivity and objectivity are absurd. It's just somehow there is this presence, and this presence is full of astounding irrational qualities, that is full of astounding irrational intelligence, and this fullness is palpable. This fullness is actual. This fullness is perceivable. And one integrates with this fullness because one is this fullness. One is already integrated with the fullness. So it's a kind of a recognition of these qualities of intelligence, of these qualities, these irrational qualities of multidimensionality. And it's very much like in Kashmir Shaivism, it said it's very much like looking, the intelligence, the consciousness looks at itself in a mirror and recognizes itself. It's like when you look in a mirror and you go, oh, this is a mirror, that's me. So, this is of course an analogy, but the consciousness, this inconceivable irrational intelligence, looks at this inconceivable irrational presence and recognizes itself. And this is the very nature of realization. This is the very nature of spiritual achievement. And efficient yoga ultimately boils down to this. Whatever its trappings, whether you've learned Sanskrit and you're wearing an orange robe, or whether you're, some kind of a technocrat geek in Silicon Valley staring at computer screens all day, whatever, realization always consists of this one recognition of what is perceiving, what is perceived, and their essentially unified transcendental nature. So again, it's a matter of recognition and appreciation, and what is to be recognized is this actual event of the real-time apparition of your experience, and the fact that is comprehensive, that there is nothing whatsoever other than this.
I keep finding myself getting to that recognition repeatedly, to where I keep saying, now what? And so then, what do I do with that insight?
But the you that is doing all that, the I that is getting to it and asking these questions, is not the real you.
Yeah, I got that.
So it's a matter of this is where the appreciation and recognition comes in. It's recognizing the you that is actually doing all this with inconceivable engagement and intelligence inherently, effortlessly. You don't. It's not like, oh, let me see. I need to experience the present moment. It's not like that, is it? It's just bang. You can't stop it. You can't turn it off. And again, as human beings, when we identify with our psychological selves, or some self that lives in our head or something, we tend to think of all that level of reality, just the apparition of experiences, and just an inert, objective fact that has nothing to do with us, instead of noticing and of course appreciating with the implications that come along with it, how profoundly it is an active engagement. And it's not an active engagement, again, that we're deciding to do or that we can decide not to do. And yet it is an active engagement that we are most certainly doing with inconceivable functionality and intelligence. And noticing this, we discover something about ourselves. We discover, wow, gee, this is me. This is me. I mean, this incredible potency that is actually engaged spontaneously and effortlessly with the full field of my actual experience. Wow. I mean, it's kind of throws the doors open. It's like, wow, there's more going on here than meets the eye. I'm kind of an interesting phenomena, and so right away that opens the door to investigating this, to appreciating it, to playing with it, poking at it, noticing it, again, sort of recognizing it and appreciating it, along with which comes a real reorientation of self-image, sense of self, and sense of stuckness, sense of empowerment, all these kinds of things, which part and parcel has been called enlightenment and so on down the years, among other things.
It's essentially the engagement with life.
Yeah, or noticing that you are in fact already completely engaged with life. But the you that is doing that is the real you, which you may or may not be used to owning or appreciating or acknowledging. So it's kind of a opening the doors to an inclusion of, wow, I am really doing this. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that amazing? Because I'm not used to thinking of myself as doing this. I'm used to thinking of it, me as being sort of over here thinking about it. And that's happening too. That's also appearing, certainly. That's sort of a harmonic aspect of what's appearing. But that's more in the content of what's appearing, not in the action of appearing itself, which is kind of what we're indicating here. As you play with this, you'll discover you have this phenomena of this appearance has an astounding multidimensionality and richness of aspects that it presents itself in that are available to navigate through and to engage with selectively. In other words, you'll discover you can kind of shift your focus to some extent, and you can kind of shift channels to some extent and notice different aspects of what's appearing. And as one discovers this, one can partake of that, and part of the trick of that is one discovers that experience does not have to be an either or. A lot of spirituality is presented as, I have to slow down my thoughts and then I'll be free of them, or whatever, this kind of thing. And that's not the case. You don't actually need to slow down your thoughts. You just need to go somewhere else where your thoughts aren't happening. Right? Go to your field of vision. There's no thinking in the field of vision. Go to if your thoughts are here, go over here somewhere. I mean, again, this is speaking sort of spatially, and of course experience isn't actually arrayed spatially, but it's a kind of a metaspatial. And again, as one appreciates and recognizes this condition as it actually is, this becomes more or less self-evident. One discovers the amazing ranges that experience presents itself in, and one discovers that one can actually sort of have some degree of freedom to navigate within this and be with different portions of it, without needing to change or shut down or deny or do anything about other portions of it. You just sort of sidestep them. You go over here. If there's too much thinking over here, you go over here. If there's not enough thinking over here, you go over here. Again, it's just become sort of please yourself.
Well, I think of the word preordained in that like you say, that reality below this wonderful reality. I think I'm making decisions. I think I'm doing this, that, and the other. But in a way, it's preordained, and I just sort of have to surrender to that.
Well, yeah, but it's even more profound than that, because you don't need to surrender to it. You notice that you are, in fact, already completely engaged with that level of it. So there's no surrendering necessary. The you that would be doing the surrendering is a pretend you that isn't the real you. Because what you're surrendering to you is the actual you, which is already completely engaged with all of this. When you see the actuality, it doesn't matter how you think of it, because the self-verifying nature of what this is takes care of all that. You don't need to think one way. You don't need to think about it one way or another. There's no way to strategize with regard to it. You just see it, and in that seeing, you spontaneously adjust to the way that it actually is.
Is there any technique or approach that you would suggest that would help reduce the cycle time?
Yes. Be subtle in noticing your experience and exploring it. And when I say noticing it, I mean not as a procedure or as a practice or as a formality, but simply, notice particular experiencing. Like if you're seeing something, notice the fact of seeing and just look at what it is. And don't look at it by thinking about it. Don't look at it analytically. Look at it by feeling it. Look at it the way you would listen to a fine piece of music. You explore it intimately. You feel it intimately. And there's a lot of richness there in that feeling of it. But you're not distanced from it. You're not analytically necessarily thinking of it, at a distance. You're immersed in it. And so, you explore your experience sort of textually and immersively. And in the process of this, what you're doing is sensitizing yourself and educating yourself in a kind of an irrational, nonverbal, illogical intelligence, which of course you have and are. And so you're basically retraining yourself to function with your own pre-logical intelligence, with your primal intelligence, which happens to be your root intelligence, and also much more powerful than your rational intelligence, which is an abstraction, which is sort of a lesser harmonic of that, you might say, or a derivation of that. And we're cut off from this more primal intelligence, not because we were actually cut off from it. In actual fact, we are it all the time and are using it all the time, but because we're so used to psychologically identifying with our conscious minds and that whole mode of intelligence that we don't recognize. We sort of schizophrenically or sort of identifying with this mode of intelligence and ignoring this other mode of intelligence that we are in fact using all the time. But we ignore it because it's so different. It's pre-verbal, it's irrational, it's very, sort of, you might say, more right brain. I mean, there's a lot of ways to qualify it, none of which would be accurate. So you're retraining yourself to be with this primal intelligence of direct engagement. And the way to do it is just through direct engagement with experience. And letting yourself take a particular experience when you're in the mood. Let yourself look at the light hitting a leaf outside your window. Just feel that for a few minutes. And after a while you'll find yourself drifting off and going into abstraction or whatever. And that's fine, just let it go. Be very loose and easy and gentle with it. And then at some point, a few minutes or hours or days later, you'll find yourself doing the same thing. And at that point, do the same, just engage, be with it. And again, when you find yourself drifting off, just let go. And that's the cycle of just doing that. And every time you do that, you will do it better, you will do it deeper, because you're kind of retraining yourself to be able to be consciously with this primal intelligence, which we're used to not being with consciously. In a way, in sort of pop psychological terms, it's training yourself to consciously enter the unconscious mind. But I mean, it just sort of in terms, euphemistically speaking, you're going to a very irrational portion of the mentality, a portion of the mentality that ordinarily we don't acknowledge from our conscious mind, because it doesn't compute in those terms. Unless you're an artist or a person who is already more heavily engaged in that sort of mode of being with your experience. But your average person is probably less so these days, because our culture doesn't emphasize it.
Would you say one of the ways to describe that behavior that we don't notice is that because it comes with?
Yeah. It's inherent.
Yeah.
I use this word inherent, but that's another way of saying the same thing. Yeah. It's so ubiquitous and so constant, we don't notice it as anything. I mean, typically, and this is like what I was talking about when I started talking today, our experience is present, and so we typically, I suppose, take that as just a given fact. Well, of course experience is here. But we don't notice that in actuality the presence of experience is something that's being very actively done. It's an active and immediate actual engagement of perceiving intelligence with an inconceivable quantity of absolutely dynamic living information.
How I first noticed that was, I caught myself turning my head in response to something, turning my head, and I thought, I'm not consciously doing that.
No, of
that's
course not.
being pulled toward that.
Of course.
It's one with the action.
Yeah, or a heartbeat, or a breathing, or walking. I mean, when you walk, you don't know. There's no way you could describe how you're walking, and yet you can effortlessly do it. How does this happen? How does this functionality happen? And in actual fact, all of our functionality happens like that. And we may or may not have a pretend conscious participation of, oh, I'm doing this and I'm thinking about it, but in actual fact, that's not really the case.
Yes.
An example you've probably heard me give many times, because I say it all the time. The conscious mind's pretension of functioning is like one of those children's car seats that's sitting. You put it next to the driver, and it's got a steering wheel and a horn. The steering wheel's not connected to anything, but the kid's going along. I'm driving. The conscious mind's like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. But our actual functioning is always by direct energy engagement. Let's call it, which is what I'm talking about with this very primal engagement with experience. And we don't typically acknowledge it because of these quirks with our psychology, where we have this identifying with this very bizarre, abstracting, self-image, conscious mind thing, which is, big can of worms.